He saw her silhouette first, taller than any girl he'd ever laid eyes on, swaying in the heat haze like a wounded giant moving through the desert. The late afternoon sun scorched the plains, turning everything into a trembling golden blur, yet the figure coming toward his water trough was unmistakably Apache, and unmistakably enormous. Tom Heller froze with the bridle in his hands, his horse snorting uneasily as if it sensed something far bigger than danger. The girl stumbled once, caught herself, then nearly collapsed against the wooden post beside the trough. Her breathing came out like a rasping growl. Tom couldn't miss the blood on her chin or the way her massive hands shook as she reached helplessly toward the water but couldn't quite steady herself enough to drink. She was young, maybe 17, but built like someone forged out of iron and dust, easily a head taller than him, maybe more. Her eyes flicked toward him, dark and wild, ready to fight even in exhaustion. He didn't know why he moved. Maybe it was fear, maybe pity, maybe the raw shock of seeing someone so powerful brought so low. But he stepped forward, cupped his hands in the trough, and lifted the water to her lips. She didn't trust him. Not at first. Her jaw clenched, and her shoulders hardened, ready to strike. But the desert had drained the last of her strength. Slowly, reluctantly, she lowered her head and drank from his palms. Her lips brushed his skin, burning hot, trembling, and when she finished, she whispered in Apache, too quietly for him to make out, then sagged to the ground. Tom stood over her, stunned. And afraid. Because he knew one truth all ranchers on the edge of Apache territory knew. If you helped the wrong person. If you touched the wrong person. If you saved the wrong person. You might not live to regret it. But leaving her there felt like murder. So he lifted the giant girl, straining under her weight though she was barely conscious, and carried her inside. He laid her on his spare cot, cleaned the cuts on her arms, and covered her with a blanket. Night fell slow and heavy, wrapping the ranch in a black silence broken only by coyotes and her deep, fevered breaths. He didn't sleep. Because the entire time, one thought carved itself deeper into his skull. If she's part of a tribe, they'll come looking. And when Apaches came looking, they came like a storm. Before dawn, she woke with a gasp, sitting upright so fast the cot nearly snapped. Her eyes locked on him, not grateful, not relieved, but fierce. Terrifying. Ancient. Her voice rumbled like distant thunder. Why give water to enemy? Tom swallowed. You weren't my enemy. You were dying. She stared at him for a long moment, as if she could see through his skin, weighing his soul with her gaze. Her hand drifted toward the knife strapped to her thigh, one he hadn't dared touch while tending her. Then she spoke a single word, rough and strangely soft. Tomorrow. And she stood, towering above him, ducking through the doorframe, and walked into the dawn without another sound. Tom didn't try to stop her, but the dread that hit him when she disappeared over the ridge was heavier than any boulder he'd lifted in his life. He didn't know whether she meant tomorrow thank you. Or tomorrow you die. He fed his livestock with shaking hands. Checked his rifle twice. Watched the horizon as if expecting it to split open. The next morning, the earth shook. Not from horses, no. This was heavier. Stronger. Like thunder rolling under the soil. Dust clouds spiraled in every direction. A sound like distant war drums rose with the wind. Tom stepped outside. And his blood froze. From the north ridge to the dry creek bed, from the sagebrush to the far canyon wall, the land was alive with mounted warriors. Their feathers whipped in the wind, their spears glinted in the rising sun, and their paint streaked across their faces like shadows of death. 300 Apache warriors. Encircling his ranch. Not charging. Not shouting. Just watching him with silent, predatory stillness. Tom's legs nearly buckled. He didn't reach for his rifle, he wasn't stupid. One wrong motion and they'd turn him into dust. A lone figure stepped out from their ranks. The giant girl. No, not a girl. A warrior princess, judging by the way the others responded to her. She walked with the force of someone who carried a tribe on her shoulders. When she reached him, she looked down with the same fierce eyes as yesterday, but something new flickered behind them. Respect. Debt. She raised a hand. The warriors lowered their weapons. Tom felt air return to his lungs. She stepped closer, close enough that he had to tilt his head back to meet her gaze. You give water, she said. Water is life. You save me. Save daughter of Chief Nanton. Save future of tribe. Her words were heavy stone, carved with meaning. My father sends warriors not to kill you, but to honor you. He collapsed onto the porch railing in disbelief. Honor me. By surrounding my ranch with 300 armed men. Her lips twitched, the faintest hint of a smile. Apaches show strength to those worthy of seeing it. Then she turned and shouted something in Apache. The ground seemed to pulse as the warriors pounded their spears into the earth in a rhythmic salute that rattled Tom's ribs. She faced him again. My name is Sakai. I owe life debt. My tribe owes life debt. Tom's mouth went dry. I didn't do anything special. Desert takes the weak. You had no reason to help enemy. No reason to touch Apache blood. Yet you did. She leaned down until her face was inches from his. When the day comes danger finds you, call my name. I come. The warriors parted for her like wine through tall grass. But before she returned to her people, she hesitated, just for a moment, and said quietly. Tomorrow. I warned you. I said tomorrow so you prepare. Not for death, but for honor. Tom couldn't speak. His heart felt like it had been pulled out, shaken, and shoved back into his chest. The warriors mounted up, the thunder of hoofs echoing across the plains. As they disappeared into the morning light, the dust they left behind shimmered like smoke rising from another world. Silence fell again. But it wasn't the same silence. Something had changed. Something enormous. Something terrifying and extraordinary. For weeks afterward, every rider who passed by the ranch spoke in whispers. Every rancher looked at Tom with wide, baffled eyes. Some claimed he'd made a deal with devils. Others said he'd bewitched an Apache tribe. A few kept their distance, believing he'd gained a power no ordinary man should have. Only Tom knew the truth. He'd simply given water to a dying girl. But in the Old West, the smallest kindness could crack the world open. Winter swept across the plains, bringing cold winds and long nights. Tom kept the fire going, kept his ranch alive, kept his thoughts quiet. But every time the wind howled through the shutters, he heard the memory of Sakai's voice. When danger comes, call my name. He wondered if he'd ever need to. He found out sooner than he wanted. One night, the ranch dogs began barking wildly, snarling at the darkness. Tom grabbed his rifle and stepped onto the porch. The moon was full and silver, lighting up the land like ghost fire. That's when he saw them, 4 horsemen creeping along the fence line, rifles drawn, faces covered. Rustlers. Killers. The kind who took land, cattle, and lives without a second thought. Tom cocked his rifle, but he knew he couldn't win. Not 4-on-1. Not outnumbered and outgunned. One of the rustlers shouted, "Come on out, rancher. We know you're alone." Tom's pulse hammered. He thought of running. Of hiding. But something inside him tightened instead, a strange, quiet certainty. He whispered into the cold night air. Sakai. Nothing happened. The rustlers laughed. But then. A distant thud. Another. Another. The rustlers' laughter died. The ground shook. In the distance, atop the ridge, a line of silhouettes rose against the moonlit sky. Feathers. Spears. Painted horses. A war cry tore across the night, a sound like a mountain splitting open. Sakai was at the front, standing on her horse like a shadow carved from stone. The rustlers didn't run. They didn't even breathe. Because there, flooding down the ridge in a wave of thunder, were scores of Apache warriors, maybe 50, maybe 100, maybe more. Enough to turn night into terror. The rustlers dropped their rifles and bolted. They didn't make it 10 yards before the Apaches surrounded them, disarmed them, and drove them into the darkness like whipped animals. Sakai approached Tom slowly, dismounted, and stood before him. You called. Tom swallowed. I didn't know if you were close enough to hear. Sakai tapped her chest with a closed fist. Life debt hears across mountains. He breathed out, shaking. Thank you. She looked at him not as a giant warrior, not as a daughter of a chief, but as someone who saw him clearly. You give water, she said again. Water becomes life. Life becomes bond. She glanced at the rustler's empty trail. Call again if danger comes. My tribe watches your land. Then she and her warriors vanished into the night as silently as they'd arrived. Tom stood alone on his porch, moonlight chilling the sweat on his skin, heart pounding with awe and fear and something deeper, something ancient. He realized then what the desert had given him. Not protection. Not power. But a story so shocking, so impossible, that no one would ever forget it. One man. One act of kindness. One giant Apache girl he'd helped without thinking. And an entire tribe that would answer his call for the rest of his life. The West was brutal. The West was cruel. But sometimes, in the middle of all that dust and blood, the West remembered a good deed with the force of thunder. And Tom Heller would never again look at a simple act of kindness without hearing the echo of 300 warriors pounding their spears into the earth in honor of the rancher who gave water when no one else would.